Rain soaked through the city's veins, pooling under flickering streetlights. A little girl sang beneath a bridge, voice trembling, eyes too brave for her age. Across the street, a man in a black suit froze, his hand shaking, his past catching up. He had built empires on fear, but that voice? It was the sound of everything he'd lost. The world slowed. Her song stopped. And when she whispered, "Mama said you used to love her," his heart broke before the thunder did. But he didn't know that moment would cost him everything he once called power. Would he run or finally stay? Rain fell in thin, stubborn lines across the New York skyline, the kind that blurred headlights and made the streets look like they were melting. Adrian Moretti sat in the back seat of his black bulletproof car, staring out through fogged glass. The man everyone in the city feared, the Mafia billionaire with an empire built on silence and shadows, was quietly unraveling inside. He never showed it, of course. His eyes hid the kind of tired that came from guilt, not work. For 5 years, he had searched for the woman who'd walked away from his mansion, leaving only a note that said, "You stopped listening." That night, fate parked him beside an old subway tunnel. His driver cursed at the smoke coming from the engine, but Adrian didn't care. He stepped out, lit a cigarette, and let the cold slap him awake. Around him, the city hummed distant horns, footsteps, the echo of hurried umbrellas. Then, through the hum, came a voice. It was faint at first, like a memory pushing through rain. A little girl was singing under the bridge, soft, trembling, full of pain and hope mixed together. Her voice carried the melody that Elena used to hum while cooking spaghetti on quiet Sundays. His hand trembled, the cigarette almost slipping. "No," he whispered, as if denying a ghost. He followed the sound. There she was, a small girl, maybe 10, her clothes damp, her fingers red from cold. She held a broken guitar with missing strings and sang into the wet air for coins that never came. People passed without looking. Adrian, the man who once paid men to silence witnesses, suddenly couldn't move. Each note of her song hit him like confession. When the tune ended, the girl looked up. Her eyes were big, brown, and hauntingly familiar. "I know you," she said, voice shaky but sure. "Mama said your name is Adrian." The world stopped. Nobody had called him by his name in years. His men called him times Boss Asterisk. The media called him times the Ghost Asterisk. He crouched slowly. "What did you say, little one?" She smiled, shy but certain. "Mama says you used to love her before she got sick." His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. "What's your mother's name?" "Elena," she answered, almost whispering it. The rain seemed to freeze mid-air. For a moment, Adrian forgot who he was, the empire, the cars, the men with guns waiting behind him. All he could see was a little girl holding the same eyes as the woman he lost. He knelt beside her, gently taking the guitar. "Come," he said softly. "Let me help you." The girl hesitated, then nodded. He carried her heavy bag with his tailored suit soaking through. They walked silently along the street, puddles catching faint reflections of city lights. Adrian glanced down at her every few steps. Something about her mannerisms, the way she hummed absent-mindedly, the way she bit her lip when nervous, it was Elena all over again. "Do you like singing?" he asked. She nodded. "Mama taught me. She said music helps you feel better when you're sad." He smiled faintly. "She always said that." Sophia, the name she finally told him, led him to a small apartment building that leaned tiredly between two shops. Inside, the hallway smelled of old paint and bread. She opened a door with peeling blue paint, calling out, "Mama, I'm home." The sight inside broke him. Elena lay on a couch, pale and fragile, a blanket pulled over her shoulders. Her hair, once glossy black, had thinned. She looked up, and the world tilted. "Adrian," she whispered, disbelief cutting through her voice. He froze in the doorway, dripping rain, his chest tightening. For years he'd imagined this moment, her storming back into his life, angry, beautiful, proud. But this Elena was different. She was weak, gentle, and more human than he'd ever allowed himself to be. He moved closer slowly, afraid she'd vanish. "Elena," he said softly, the name like prayer. Sophia looked between them, confused. "Mama, you know him?" Elena nodded faintly, tears sliding down her cheeks. Yes, baby. I know him. He sat on the edge of the couch, his powerful hands trembling. You're sick. Why didn't you call me? Her lips quivered. You were busy, building your world, and I didn't want her growing up around guns. Silence stretched heavy. Adrian turned away, shame burning deeper than any bullet wound. I looked for you everywhere. I know, she whispered, but some wounds heal better in quiet. For the first time in years, he didn't have words. He reached for his phone, calling his doctor without thinking. I'm sending you an address, he barked. Now, bring everything. The girl blinked. Are you rich or something? Adrian almost laughed. A soft, sad sound. Something like that. When the doctor arrived, Adrian didn't leave Elena's side. He watched as medicine replaced pain, as hope flickered faintly in her eyes. In that small, dim room, he realized how far he'd drifted from being human. All the money, the power, the loyalty, it meant nothing beside a woman fighting to breathe and a little girl clutching a cracked guitar. That night, when Sophia slept curled beside her mother, Adrian sat in the corner, head in his hand. The melody she sang earlier replayed endlessly. He understood then what loneliness truly cost him. Before dawn, Elena stirred. Why are you still here? He looked up. Because I should have never left. She smiled weakly. You didn't leave, Adrian. You just stopped showing up. That line pierced him deeper than any betrayal. He took her frail hand gently, whispering, Then let me show up now. Outside, the rain had stopped. The first light crept across the window, soft and forgiving. For the first time in years, Adrian Moretti felt peace, a fragile, unfamiliar peace born not from control, but from care. The morning light that crept through the thin curtains was soft but merciless, painting the cracked walls with pale gold. Adrian sat in silence, still in his drenched clothes from the night before, elbows resting on his knees, watching Elena breathe. Every shallow rise of her chest felt like a fragile thread holding the universe together. Sophia stirred from her sleep beside her mother and smiled when she saw Adrian still there. You didn't leave, she said in a half-whisper, rubbing her sleepy eyes. He shook his head gently. Didn't feel right to leave you two alone. The girl nodded as if she already trusted him. Mama says only good people stay. That line cut deeper than Sophia could ever understand. Adrian's throat tightened. Asterisk. Good people. Asterisk. It had been years since anyone used those words near his name. Outside, his men waited in the car, restless and confused. They were used to their boss handling million-dollar deals, not breakfast with strangers in a rundown apartment. When the doctor arrived, Adrian stayed close. He didn't care about the doctor's judgment or the stares that came with his expensive suit in such a small, humble room. The doctor examined Elena quietly, then pulled Adrian aside. She's been neglecting treatment, he said softly. Severe anemia and fatigue, but with proper care, she'll recover. She needs rest, warmth, and nutrition. Adrian nodded. Do everything she needs. Money isn't a problem. The doctor looked at him for a moment, then simply said, Sometimes money isn't the cure, sir. When the doctor left, Adrian returned to find Sophia brushing her mother's hair with tiny, careful hands. Mama says, hair makes you feel alive, she said. Elena smiled faintly, her eyes meeting Adrian's. Still trying to fix everything with money and silence, I see. He pulled up a chair. I didn't know you were sick, Elena. She sighed softly. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to come back because you felt guilty. I'm not here for guilt, he said, voice trembling. I'm here because He stopped himself. The words felt too fragile to finish. Elena smiled faintly. Because you still care, she finished for him. That's enough for now. Sophia looked between them with innocent curiosity. Mama, is he your friend? Elena hesitated. Adrian glanced at her, silently asking for permission. She nodded once. Yes, baby. He's an old friend. The word old times, echoed like regret. He spent the rest of the day fixing small things, replacing the flickering bulb, sending one of his men for groceries, leaving cash quietly under the table. When Elena protested, he smiled. Don't argue with me. I'm terrible at losing. She laughed softly. and for a moment it was like old times, the sound of her laughter bringing warmth into spaces that had forgotten what joy felt like. That evening, Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor, scribbling in a notebook. "I'm writing a song," she said proudly. "It's about a man who forgot how to smile, but then met a girl who sang for him." Adrian smiled, though his eyes glistened. "That sounds like a beautiful story." "It's your story, Mr. Adrian," she said without looking up. Elena chuckled weakly. "She sees right through people." Adrian leaned back, looking at the two of them, the woman he once loved, and the little girl who carried her laughter. Something stirred inside him, something he thought was buried under power and control. It was love, raw and disarming. As night approached, he helped Elena sit up and brought her soup. She looked at him with soft disbelief. "You? Serving food? The mighty Adrian Moretti?" He smirked. Even kings serve when it matters. Her smile lingered, and he caught himself memorizing the curve of her lips, the small scar near her eyebrow, the way her fingers trembled when she held the spoon. Time had stolen so much, but not her grace. Later, when Sophia was asleep again, Adrian finally asked the question that had been gnawing at him all day. "Elena, the girl, is she mine?" Elena froze, her eyes glistening. "Adrian." He leaned forward, voice low but steady. "Tell me the truth. Please." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, she's yours." For a moment he couldn't breathe. He stood up, pacing the small room like a man lost between joy and grief. "All these years, you kept her from me." "I had to," she whispered. "You lived in a world of guns, deals, and danger. I couldn't let her grow up looking over her shoulder." He stopped pacing, his expression softening. "You think I wouldn't have changed for her?" Elena looked at him tenderly. "You would have tried. But men like you, your enemies, never let you rest. I wanted her to have peace, not guards." He sank back into the chair, his hand covering his face. "I missed everything. Her first word, her first step, every birthday." Elena reached out, touching his arm gently. "You can still have moments that matter. Don't waste them thinking about what you lost." Her words wrapped around him like forgiveness. He realized then that power was worthless without love to anchor it. He had built an empire only to sit in an empty house. Now, in this small apartment, he finally felt alive again. As the clock ticked softly, Elena leaned back. "You know, she'll want to sing for you again tomorrow." He smiled faintly. "Then tomorrow, I'll listen." Outside, the rain began again, gentler this time, like the sky whispering its own apology. Adrian watched Elena drift asleep and felt something shift in his chest, a quiet promise forming. He wasn't going to lose them again, not to sickness, not to pride, not to the ghosts of his past. He stood by the window, watching city lights flicker through the mist, and whispered, "I'll protect you both, whatever it takes." For the first time in years, his words weren't a threat, they were a vow. The next few weeks unfolded like slow, healing rain. Every morning, Adrian stopped by the little apartment before work, bringing breakfast and fresh flowers, something Elena used to love. The fearsome Mafia boss became a quiet man who carried groceries in one hand and a stuffed toy in the other. His men whispered behind tinted car windows, confused and amused, but no one dared to question him. They had never seen their leader smile before Sophia walked into his life. Sophia, in her own way, began to fill the silence in Adrian's soul. She talked nonstop, asked curious questions, and laughed with the pure kind of joy that made even the darkest heart feel warm. One afternoon, while she drew on the table, she looked up and said, "Mama says people can change if they really want to. Do you think that's true, Mr. Adrian?" He smiled. "I do, but change takes courage." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe you're brave now." That simple sentence felt like a benediction. But peace never lasts long in Adrian Moretti's world. One morning, as he stood by his car after dropping Sophia at school, a black SUV pulled up. A familiar perfume hit him before the door opened, sweet, sharp, and full of trouble. "Hello, stranger," said Isabella Rossi, stepping out with a smirk that hadn't aged. She was the woman whose rumor years ago had destroyed his relationship with Elena. Back then, she'd been his bodyguard's sister, manipulative, and obsessed with having Adrian to herself. He clenched his jaw. "What are you doing here, Isabella?" She tilted her head. I could ask the same. The great Adrian Moretti, hiding in a poor neighborhood, playing family man. How charming. He turned to leave, but her next words froze him. "You know, the press would love to hear about the girl. What was her name again? Sophia?" He stopped. Every instinct sharpened. Stay away from them. Isabella laughed softly. "Oh, Adrian, you think you can erase your past with soup and lullabies? The world doesn't forget men like you. Maybe Elena doesn't either. Does she know you ordered her cousin's arrest years ago?" He turned sharply, eyes dark. That was business. And he was guilty. "Maybe," she said, shrugging. "But facts don't matter when the truth can be twisted. I could ruin you and her again." His voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "What do you want?" Isabella smiled like a cat that found cream. "You, or at least the man you used to be. I miss him, the one who didn't care who got hurt." Adrian stepped closer, his tone like cold steel. "That man died the night I lost Elena. Don't make me resurrect him." She smirked. "We'll see." Then she turned and disappeared into the traffic, leaving a scent of perfume and trouble behind. That night, he couldn't sleep. The fear he hadn't felt in years crept into his bones, not fear for himself, but for Elena and Sophia. He'd promised peace, and now his past was clawing back through the cracks. When he visited the next morning, Elena noticed the tension in his face. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. He tried to brush it off. "Nothing I can't handle." She frowned. "You forget I used to read you like a book." He sighed, sitting beside her, Isabella's back. The name alone drained the color from Elena's face. "She's the reason we broke apart." "I know," he said softly. "And she's threatening to expose everything to ruin what we've built here." Elena looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "She can't stand to see you happy." Adrian nodded. "I won't let her touch you or Sophia. I'll take care of it." But Elena reached for his hand. "No more violence, Adrian. Not this time. Promise me." He hesitated. Every instinct screamed to eliminate threats before they struck, but her touch silenced that darkness. "I promise," he said quietly. For a while, things seemed calm. Adrian tightened his security discreetly, hired guards under the guise of maintenance workers, and watched every shadow near the apartment. He thought he was ahead of Isabella until the day Sophia came home crying. "Some lady took pictures of me at school," she sobbed. "She said Mama was famous and wanted to help." Adrian's blood turned cold. "Did she hurt you?" Sophia shook her head, but fear lingered in her eyes. That night, he found Isabella waiting near his car again, leaning casually on the hood. "Cute kid," she said with a smirk. "Looks just like her mother. Or you." He stepped forward slowly. "You crossed a line." "Relax," she said, twirling her phone. "Just a few pictures for insurance. I'm not cruel yet." "What do you want, Isabella?" Her expression hardened. "I want you to remember who you are. You belong to power, not pity. This," she gestured toward the apartment building, "isn't you. Come back to your world, Adrian, or I'll burn hers." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Every fiber of him wanted to end her threats right there. But he remembered Elena's plea. Asterisk. No more violence. Asterisk. He leaned close, voice low and shaking with restrained fury. "If you ever come near them again, you'll see what I've become when I fight for love, not power." She stared at him for a moment, unnerved by the calm in his eyes. Then she scoffed, flipping her hair. "We'll see who wins, lover boy." After she left, Adrian stood under the streetlight for a long time, rain washing over him again. He realized Isabella wasn't the only danger. His own past crimes, his old alliances, and the ghosts of his name could destroy the fragile peace he'd found. When he went back inside, Elena was awake, waiting. "You saw her, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, and she's not done." Elena took his hand, her eyes steady despite the fear. "Then we face her together." In that small moment, strength replaced dread. For the first time, Adrian didn't feel like a monster trying to protect a dream. He felt like a man building a family worth protecting. He looked at Elena and whispered, "I won't let her win." Outside, thunder rolled like distant war drums, hinting that the storm was far from over. The next morning, the city woke to news that shook its underworld. Every major newspaper headline screamed, Mafia billionaire Adrian Moretti under investigation. The story detailed his empire's illegal foundations, the betrayals, and the blood spilled along the way. It wasn't a leak. It was his own confession. He had walked into the police station the night before, unarmed, unguarded, and signed papers that would dismantle everything he'd built. For the first time in 20 years, Adrian faced daylight with nothing to hide behind. No lawyers, no lies, no armor of fear, just truth. He had done it to protect them, Elena and Sofia. The press called it madness. His men called it betrayal, but Adrian called it redemption. He knew Isabella had eyes everywhere, and the only way to take away her weapon was to tell the truth before she could twist it. He didn't ask for immunity. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He only asked the prosecutor to keep Elena and Sofia's names out of the reports. When the cameras swarmed around him that morning, someone shouted, "Is it true you have a daughter?" Adrian's voice stayed calm. "Yes, and she's the only innocent thing I've ever been part of." That clip went viral. People who once whispered about him in fear suddenly saw a man breaking under the weight of his past. Some called it bravery, others called it a stunt, but to him, it was freedom. When the news reached Elena, she didn't know whether to cry or scream. She turned on the TV and saw him, surrounded by flashing lights, his hands cuffed but his head held high. Sofia clutched her mother's arm. "Mama, why is he there? Did he do something bad?" Elena knelt, tears filling her eyes. "He did bad things long ago, baby, but now he's trying to make them right." Sofia's voice trembled. "Will they hurt him?" Elena pulled her close. "He's strong, and good people face the truth, even when it hurts." That night, when Elena finally saw him through the glass of the holding room, she barely recognized him. Not because he'd changed physically, he still carried that quiet, commanding presence, but because there was something gentler in his eyes. The coldness was gone. In its place lived exhaustion and peace. "Why, Adrian?" she whispered through the phone. "You could have run. You always run when things get hard." He smiled faintly. "Running cost me you once. I wasn't making that mistake again." She shook her head, fighting tears. "You've destroyed everything." He nodded. "Everything that needed to burn. Do you think this will fix us?" she asked softly. "No," he admitted. "But maybe it'll stop more pain from finding us." The line went silent for a while. Only the hum of the light between them filled the space. Finally, Elena said, "Sofia keeps singing your song." He smiled. "That song saved me once. Tell her to keep singing." The next week blurred into hearings, reporters, and old enemies pretending to be friends. Adrian refused to name names or trade information. He carried the weight himself. And when the court finally allowed him to walk free on probation, stripped of his titles and assets, he didn't look back. He went straight to the little apartment, but when he knocked, there was no answer. The neighbor said they had moved out a few days earlier. She said she needed a fresh start, the old woman told him kindly. Somewhere the past wouldn't follow. Adrian nodded, heart sinking. He understood. Maybe this was her way of forgiving him, by leaving before she hated him again. He spent the next month living quietly by the sea, in a small rented house where nobody knew his name. He worked at a boatyard, fixing engines and cleaning docks. Some days he'd watch fathers teaching their daughters to skip stones and wonder if Sofia still sang that song. One rainy evening, he sat by the window, staring at the storm, when he heard a knock. He opened the door slowly and froze. Elena stood there, soaked from the rain, holding Sofia's hand. "We found you," she said simply. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat closed with emotion. Sofia smiled shyly and ran into his arms. "Mama said we're starting over. Together." Elena stepped closer, her eyes soft. "You kept your promise, Adrian. You gave her peace. Now let's build something new, without lies, without fear." He took a slow breath, as if learning to live again. "I don't have much left," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You have us. That's enough." That night, for the first time in years, They ate together at a wooden table, the sound of the ocean replacing the noise of the city. Sophia sang softly between bites of pasta, her voice light and pure. Adrian listened, tears glistening. He didn't stop them this time. Later, when Sophia fell asleep, Elena touched his cheek. "You know, you're still the man I fell in love with. You just had to lose everything to find yourself." He smiled faintly. "I'd lose it all again for this." She rested her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the rain fade into morning light. Days turned into weeks, and though the world forgot the name times Adrian Moretti, Sophia never did. To her, he wasn't a mafia boss or a billionaire, he was just her dad, the man who always showed up, even when it cost him everything. One afternoon, as they walked along the shore collecting shells, Sophia looked up and asked, "Daddy, do you think people can really change forever?" He smiled, lifting her up into his arms. "I think people can learn to love better, and that's the same thing." Elena laughed softly, spoken like a man who finally understands the meaning of peace. He looked at her, eyes warm and steady. Peace isn't the absence of war, it's the presence of love. And for the first time, that didn't sound like a line from one of his speeches, it sounded like truth. The day of the wedding dawned warm and bright, the kind of day when even the sea seemed to smile. The little chapel sat on a cliff outside the city, simple and whitewashed, with wildflowers leaning toward the sunlight. Adrian stood near the doorway, in a modest gray suit, hands trembling slightly. For a man who once commanded armies of men with a glance, it was strange to be nervous about love. Inside, the wooden benches were filled not with politicians or businessmen but with fishermen, neighbors, and a few friends they'd made since moving to the coast. The air smelled of salt and lilies. Sophia darted between the aisles in her flower girl dress, scattering petals with the solemn importance only a child could muster. When she caught her father's eye, she grinned. "Don't cry, Daddy. You'll ruin your tie." He laughed softly. "I'll try, Princess." Then the music began, just a single guitar. Sophia's tiny fingers strummed the same melody she had once sung in the subway tunnel. The tune floated through the chapel, wrapping itself around the hearts of everyone present. The crowd hushed. Some smiled. Some quietly wiped their eyes. For Adrian, every note was a bridge across years of regret. As Elena appeared at the doorway, time slowed. She wasn't the fragile woman he'd first found on that worn couch. She looked strong, radiant, alive. Her simple white dress flowed like water, her hair crowned with tiny pearls Sophia had picked from the shore. When their eyes met, the world shrank to a heartbeat. Sophia's voice trembled slightly as she sang the last verse, the same words that had once stopped him in the rain. "Love doesn't end when we walk away. It hides in songs we forget to play." The congregation applauded softly as Elena reached the altar. Adrian took her hand gently, whispering, "You brought me back to life." "And you finally learned to live," she replied. The priest smiled, beginning the ceremony. "Marriage," he said, "isn't about perfection. It's about two people choosing forgiveness again and again. Today, these two souls choose peace over pride, love over fear." When the vows came, Adrian spoke first, voice steady but filled with emotion. "I once believed power was safety and silence was strength. But you showed me that real strength is being seen. I hurt you, I lost you, and yet you stood before me again. I promise to listen now, to show up, to be the man our daughter already believes I am." Elena's eyes shimmered. "I walked away because I thought love couldn't survive the noise of your world, but you proved me wrong. You tore down everything that kept you untouchable. And somehow, that's when I finally saw your heart. I promise not to run when life gets loud. We'll face it together." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, applause filled the chapel. Adrian bent to kiss her forehead first, a quiet act of reverence, then met her lips as sunlight poured through the stained glass behind them. Outside, the bells rang across the bay. After the ceremony, guests gathered near the shore for a small feast. Children chased gulls, and old women hummed along to Sophia's guitar. Adrian stood at the edge of the sand watching Elena laugh with the villagers. For the first time, he felt no urge to control anything. Peace didn't need bodyguards. Sophia tugged at his sleeve. Dance with Mama. He smiled. I don't know how. She giggled. Then just hold her and sway. That's what love songs mean. So he did. Barefoot on the wet sand, they moved slowly to the rhythm of Sophia's humming. Around them, the ocean breathed in and out like a calm witness. Adrian whispered, You ever think we'd get here? Elena leaned into him. Every night I prayed we would. I just didn't think the road would hurt this much. He kissed the top of her head. Sometimes you have to lose your crown to find your heart. She laughed softly. That sounds like something our daughter will write into a song. As dusk fell, lanterns flickered across the beach. Sophia ran between guests with sparklers, her laughter echoing through the wind. Adrian watched her and thought of all the nights he'd traded moments like this for meetings and money. Never again, he murmured. Later, when the guests had gone and the sea was just a whisper, the three of them sat together by a small fire. Sophia curled against her mother's shoulder, half asleep. Tell me a story, she mumbled. Adrian smiled. Once upon a time, there was a man who thought he could buy everything except forgiveness. Then one day, he heard a little girl sing and realized forgiveness had been singing to him all along. Sophia smiled drowsily. That's a nice story. Daddy. Elena met his eyes over the child's head. It's ours now. The fire crackled softly as the waves rolled in. Adrian looked at the two of them, feeling the quiet contentment that had eluded him his entire life. You know, he said, for all the chaos, I think love just needed us to stop running long enough to catch up. Elena squeezed his hand. And to listen. They sat there until the stars replaced the lanterns, until the ocean swallowed every sound except laughter. The world might remember Adrian Moretti as a fallen billionaire, but in this tiny circle of warmth, he was simply a man who'd learned that peace begins when pride ends. Moral lessons. Love doesn't always arrive dressed in perfection. It often walks back into our lives through mistakes, forgiveness, and small acts of kindness. Adrian's story reminds us that it's never too late to rebuild what we broke, to choose patience instead of pride, and to let empathy heal what power once destroyed. So wherever you are, remember, your story can still turn toward light. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and tell us in the comments what forgiveness means to you. You've got this, and love always finds its way home.